I can't eat this anymore." The words were no louder than a breath, but they cut through the quiet house like shattered glass. Richard Cole froze mid-step in the foyer, keys slipping from his hand onto the marble tray with a metallic clink. His heart hammered once, twice. He followed the sound, each step heavier than the last. Lucky, the family retriever, barked muffled from behind the mudroom door. Then another sound softer, stranger reached him. The scrape of a chair leg and the slam of a cupboard door. When Richard reached the back corridor, the storage room door stood ajar. He pushed it open. The sight inside turned his blood cold. Anna sat cross-legged on the floor, thin arms hugging her knees. In front of her, a chipped bowl of gray, curdled oatmeal, crawling with flies. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, and something else bruised shadows blooming near her temple. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking, "I can't eat this anymore." Before Richard could move, a sharp slap cracked through the air. Elaine, his wife of 3 years, stood above the child, hand still raised, her manicured nails catching the light. Richard's body jolted forward. "What the hell are you doing?" Elaine whirled, her face morphing instantly from fury to polished calm. "Richard, you startled me." Her smile was sharp as glass. "It's not what it looks like." "Ugh, not what it looks like?" He pointed at Anna, who cowered back against the wall. "She's eating spoiled food in a storage room. She's shaking. And you hit her." Elaine's voice cooled, each word deliberate. "Don't exaggerate." She was acting out again, refusing discipline, wasting food. "You can't let her run wild." Richard dropped to his knees. "Anna, sweetheart." He touched her wrist icy, trembling. She tried to shrink into herself, a ragged doll in frayed clothes. He lifted the bowl, the stench of sour rot hitting his nose. He slammed it onto the counter. "This isn't food. This is punishment." Elaine rolled her eyes. "Oh, so now you know better than Dr. Pike?" He recommended simplified meals for her behavioral issues. "You've been gone so often, you don't see the tantrums I deal with." Richard's voice dropped. "Don't you dare call this parenting." The retriever barked again from the mudroom, frantic claws scratching against the door. Anna flinched at the sound, clutching her sweater tighter. Richard strode over, flung the door open. Lucky barreled out, bounding straight to Anna, tail thumping. The girl buried her face in his fur, sobbing silently. Elaine's mask slipped for half a heartbeat, annoyance flashing sharp in her eyes. She crossed her arms. "If you undermine me like this, you'll destroy any chance she has at structure. You spoil her with sympathy. You're too blind to see she manipulates you." Richard squared his shoulders. "She's 6, Elaine. 6. What kind of child manipulates someone into moldy oatmeal?" His tone broke on the word child. Silence spread, thick as cement. Clara, the housekeeper, appeared at the doorway, clutching a dish towel. Her gaze darted from the half-empty bowl to Anna's bruised face. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, lips pressed white. Richard caught her hesitation. "Clara, how long has this been happening?" The older woman's hands trembled. "Sir, She glanced at Elaine, who glared like a blade. Clara's voice fell to a whisper. "I've seen her in here before." Shock hit Richard like a fist to the chest. Elaine's voice sliced the air. "Enough, Clara. Don't stir gossip." "Richard, you're overreacting." Richard crouched again beside Anna. She clutched something in her small hand, a scrap of paper. He gently pried it loose. A child's drawing, a dark square, a stick figure inside. The word help scrawled in crooked letters. His throat tightened. He looked up at Elaine, eyes blazing. "This ends now. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this." Elaine tilted her head, her smile brittle. "Or what? You'll ruin this family's reputation over a child's doodle?" Richard's voice was steady, deadly calm. "Number, I'll protect my daughter, Media." The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Upstairs, The house was grand, serene, every surface polished. But down here, in this narrow room, Richard Cole saw the rot beneath the marble. He reached for Anna's hand. "Come, sweetheart." He guided her toward the kitchen. Lucky trotted beside them like a sentry. As Clara set about making soup, the air thick with garlic and butter, Richard sat Anna at the island. He brushed her hair gently back from her face. She looked up at him, eyes wet, then down at the paper still clutched in his fist. For the first time that night, her lips moved without sound. But he could read it clear. "Thank you." Richard's chest ached. He squeezed her hand. "No more storage rooms, not while I'm here." But as he spoke, he knew a battle had begun, one that would test everything he was, and everything he owned. The night pressed down heavy over the Cole estate, wrapping the house in a silence that felt too deliberate, too staged, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Richard stood in the upstairs hallway with a tumbler of water in his hand, staring at the muted glow under Anna's bedroom door. He had tucked her in an hour ago. Lucky lay curled at her feet, watchful as a guard. Yet Richard couldn't bring himself to retreat to his study or his bed. The image of that storage room, the chipped bowl, the flies, the bruise on his daughter's temple burned behind his eyelids. From the master bedroom came the soft click of a drawer. Elaine's voice floated out, smooth as silk. "You're pacing like a suspect, Richard. Do you want the staff to think you've lost your mind?" He stepped into the doorway. Elaine sat at her vanity, brushing her hair in slow strokes, the kind of gesture meant to project calm. Her reflection caught his eyes, glinting in the mirror. "You slapped her," he said quietly. She paused, brush mid-air. Then she set it down with deliberate precision and turned. "You saw a correction. Children need to know limits. You overreacted, as usual." "Limits?" His voice sharpened. "Rotten food in a locked room? Bruises? That isn't discipline. That's cruelty." Elaine rose gracefully, tying her robe. "You've been absent for months at a time. Chasing deals. You show up, and suddenly you're an expert? Don't embarrass yourself. You don't know what it's been like managing her moods." Richard's jaw clenched. He almost shouted, almost let rage take the wheel, but something in him warned that shouting gave her power. He forced his tone low. "I know what I saw. And I'll see more, if I have to." Elaine tilted her head, smile thin. "Then, by all means, watch. But don't forget. People will believe me first. A respected philanthropist who's finally expecting a child of her own. Yes, I told Dr. Pike we might be trying." Imagine the narrative. The doting stepmother, and the absentee billionaire who can't control his grief-ridden daughter. The words landed like acid. Richard's hand tightened around the glass until he feared it would shatter. "She's not grief-ridden. She's neglected." Elaine moved closer, close enough that he caught the faint perfume on her skin. "Careful, Richard. Accusations sound ugly without proof. And proof, well, it's always tricky in a family matter. Ask yourself who the court would believe." Her robe brushed his arm as she passed him, leaving the room dark when she flicked off the vanity light. Her voice trailed behind her like smoke. "Don't make enemies in your own home." Richard stood alone, chest heaving. For the first time in years, he felt powerless in his own house. Downstairs, Clara wiped the counters, her hands trembling faintly. She looked up as Richard entered the kitchen. "Sir," she whispered, "I should have spoken sooner, but Mrs. Cole, she warned me. Said my job, my immigration papers, they'd vanish if I interfered." Richard studied her lined face, the shame carved deep. He softened. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe Anna your truth. Keep your eyes open. Tell me everything you see, everything you hear. No more silence." Clara nodded, tears threatening. "I will, sir." Richard lingered by the mudroom. Lucky patted over, nose nudging his hand. The dog's loyalty was uncomplicated, unwavering. Richard crouched, scratching behind his ears. "You saw it, didn't you, boy? You knew before I did." Lucky whined softly, as though answering. Upstairs, a door closed, Elaine retreating. The house sank back into its brittle stillness. Richard poured himself coffee, though it was near midnight. He opened his laptop at the kitchen island and created a new folder. He named it simply Truth. Into it went Clara's whispered account, a photo he snapped of Anna's drawing with the word help scrawled across the page, and a short video he pulled from the hallway camera showing Lucky pawing at the storage room door earlier that day. Evidence. Small, but evidence. The next morning, Richard drove Anna to school himself. The November air bit cold. The maple trees lining the suburban streets stood bare and skeletal. Anna sat silently in the back seat, clutching Lucky's worn collar he had let her bring along. Her sweater was freshly laundered, but still ragged at the cuffs. At drop-off, Miss Turner approached. She was young, with bright eyes shadowed by worry. "Mr. Cole? Could I speak with you?" Richard stiffened. "Of course." Anna shuffled toward the playground, shoulders hunched, eyes darting back. Lucky barked once, sharp, before Richard clipped on his leash and guided him aside. "Miss," Turney lowered her voice. "I've been concerned. Anna's lost weight. She rarely eats snack. Yesterday she wouldn't join recess, she drew instead. When I looked, it was a square with a stick figure inside, over and over." Richard's throat tightened. He showed her the photo of the drawing from under Anna's pillow. Miss Turner's lips pressed thin. "I'm obligated as a mandated reporter, Mr. Cole. If I believe a child is being neglected or harmed, I must notify Child Protective Services." He nodded slowly. "Do what you must. And keep me informed." Driving back, Richard's phone buzzed. A message from Elaine. "Where did you run off with her? Don't play games with me." He gripped the wheel tighter. He thought of Anna whispering, "I can't eat this anymore." Of Elaine's raised hand. Of Clara's whispered fear. Something inside him hardened into resolve. That evening, after Anna was asleep and Lucky stationed by her bed, Richard set up 3 hidden cameras, one angled at the storage room, one at the kitchen, one in the back hall. He checked each red light. Quiet sentinels, ready to catch what words might fail to prove. Near midnight, Elaine descended the stairs, phone at her ear. Richard, standing in the shadows, caught only fragments. "Lowell will draft it. Guardianship. Assets safe. He's too distracted." She vanished into the den, voice hushed. Richard's pulse pounded. Guardianship. Assets. Not just cruelty. Then calculation. He retreated to his office, opened the folder Truth, and typed a new entry. Date, time, Elaine's call, words, guardianship, assets. Then he closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. The weight of the coming battle pressed down, heavier than any boardroom war. He whispered into the empty room, as if to remind himself. No more silence. Not this time. The next morning dawned gray, with a sky that threatened rain. Richard stood in the kitchen, staring at the steam curling from his coffee mug, barely tasting the bitterness on his tongue. The hidden cameras had recorded their first night. He hadn't dared watch the footage yet. He knew he would need a clear mind and the courage to confront whatever the lens had captured. Clara entered quietly, apron teared, hair pulled back. She hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Cole, Anna left something on the nightstand. I thought you should see it." She placed a folded sheet of notebook paper on the counter. Richard opened it with careful fingers. The drawing was crude but unmistakable. A rectangle with no windows, a stick figure crouched inside, and a set of jagged lines that looked like bars. Across the top, in shaky letters, "No light." He closed his eyes, grief tightening his throat. 6 years old, and already her world was defined by cages. He folded the paper and slipped it into the Truth folder on his laptop. Evidence was growing, piece by piece, like sharp shards of glass. Anna padded into the kitchen, still in her pajamas. Lucky close at her heels. She didn't speak, but her eyes flicked to the paper Richard had just folded away. She seemed to know what he had seen. He bent, kissed the crown of her curls, and whispered, "It's safe with me, Anna." Breakfast was quiet. Elaine swept in late, radiant in her workout gear. Smoothie in hand, as if nothing had transpired the night before. She kissed Richard lightly on the cheek and murmured, "Don't let the staff indulge her moods." Then she breezed out again, leaving the faint scent of citrus in her wake. After dropping Anna at school, Richard drove back to the house and braced himself. He opened the camera folder on his laptop and pressed play. At first, the grainy footage showed only empty halls. Then, near midnight, Elaine appeared in frame, leading Anna by the arm. She carried the same chipped bowl as the night before. The child resisted, pulling back, but Elaine jerked her forward, lips moving in words the audio captured. "You eat what I give you, or you get nothing." Richard froze the frame. Anna's face was streaked with tears, her small body tense with fear. He leaned back, fists clenched, chest tight. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof. He saved the clip and backed it up twice. The phone rang. It was Miss Turner. "Mr. Cole, I need to let you know. I filed a preliminary report this morning. CPS will likely contact you within the next 48 hours. Richard exhaled. "Thank you. You did the right thing." There was hesitation on the other end. "Sir, I've seen bruises on her arms. Faint, but consistent. Please, don't wait. Protect her." He promised he would. By evening, tension was coiled so tightly inside the house that even the air seemed to vibrate. Anna ate dinner at the island, small spoonfuls of mac and cheese, while Lucky sat guard at her side. Elaine stood by the window with her phone pressed to her ear, voice low, smooth, rehearsed. Richard caught fragments. "Guardianship papers. Pike will sign. He won't fight if I corner him." She ended the call, turning toward Richard with an unbothered smile. "You've been busy," she said, eyes darting to the laptop on the counter. "Emails late at night. Locked folders. Should I be concerned?" "Concerned?" His voice was flat. "Maybe you should be." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Don't make this a contest. You'll lose. Courts don't strip custody from mothers, Richard, and everyone knows I've been the one raising her while you play the absentee father." Anna shrank lower on her stool, fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Richard forced himself not to rise, not to give Elaine the satisfaction of seeing his temper. "If the truth is on your side," he said evenly, "you have nothing to fear." That night, after tucking Anna into bed, Richard returned to his study. He opened the truth folder and stared at the growing list. Drawings, video, audio snippets, Clara's account, Miss Turner's email. Yet even with mounting proof, a gnawing fear ate at him. Would it be enough against Elaine's polish, her crafted lies, her false narrative of motherhood? The answer came sooner than he expected. At noon the next day, a sleek black sedan pulled up the drive. Out stepped Attorney Lowell, Elaine's legal confidant. He entered the living room as if he owned it, a folder tucked under his arm. Elaine joined him moments later, radiant, her hand resting casually on his sleeve. Richard stood. "What is this?" Lowell smiled with the practiced ease of a man who spent his life dismantling others in court. "Richard, let's keep this civil. Elaine has asked me to present a guardianship arrangement. In light of Anna's ongoing behavioral struggles, Dr. Pike recommends Elaine assume primary custodial control." He slid the papers onto the coffee table, crisp and heavy with signatures. Richard didn't sit. "You expect me to hand over my daughter to the woman I found locking her in a storage room?" Elaine's eyes narrowed. "Choose your words carefully. Without proof. That's slander. And slander against your wife will not look good in the press." Richard leaned forward, voice low. "I have proof. More than enough." For the first time, Lowell's smile faltered. Elaine reached quickly to cover it with a laugh. "Oh, Richard, always the dramatist. Empty threats won't scare us." Richard gathered the papers, tore them cleanly down the middle, and let the halves fall to the floor. "The only arrangement here is that Anna is my daughter. And I will fight for her." Lowell's eyes hardened. "Then prepare yourself. You're walking into a battle you can't win with emotion alone." When they left, the silence that filled the house was heavier than before. Richard stood by the window, watching the sedan glide away, his pulse a steady drumbeat of resolve. He knew then that the conflict had shifted. This wasn't only about cruelty hidden in dark rooms. It was about power, money, and control. Elaine wasn't going to back down. She was preparing for war. That night, Clara found Richard in the kitchen, head bowed over the laptop. "Sir," she whispered. "I recorded something." She held up a small device. "When she threatened Anna 2 nights ago, I had this in my pocket." It caught her words. "I didn't know if I should. But now," Richard took the recorder gently, relief and sorrow flooding him at once. "You did the right thing." He played the clip, Elaine's voice sharp and unmistakable. "Eat what I give you, or you get nothing." The proof cut through the air like a blade. Richard closed his eyes. "This goes in the folder. And soon, it goes to the court." Ugh. He looked at Clara, then at the recorder, then at the door to Anna's room where Lucky stood guard as always. In that moment, Richard understood that the battle wasn't in the future. It had already begun. Rain pattered steadily against the tall windows, blurring the view of the manicured gardens. Richard sat in the study late that evening, the glow of his laptop screen painting his face in cold light. The truth folder had grown heavier: drawings, photos, videos, audio, yet still, the weight pressing against his chest told him it wasn't enough. Elaine's power came not from truth but from charm, from her uncanny ability to look every inch the refined, compassionate wife when outsiders glanced in. He knew that charm could twist into a weapon the moment he challenged her. Anna had gone to bed hours earlier, curled beneath a thick quilt with Lucky curled at her feet. Richard had read her a story, his voice gentle but tight, his mind not on the words. She hadn't spoken, only traced the outline of the dog's fur with her small fingers, eyes distant. Each night, her silence screamed louder. Downstairs, the sound of laughter broke the quiet. Richard stood and walked toward the kitchen. Elaine was there, radiant in silk, entertaining Mr. Adler, their neighbor from 2 doors down. The old man, in his Yankees cap and thick winter coat, sat at the island with a steaming cup of coffee, chuckling at something Elaine had just said. "Oh, Richard," Elaine exclaimed brightly when she saw him. "You know George Adler, of course. He stopped by to check in after seeing the lights. I told him you've been working too hard." Richard forced a polite smile, shaking Adler's hand. The neighbor's eyes were kind, though they darted toward Elaine with a look of admiration. "This one," Adler said, chuckling. "She keeps the whole block running. We're lucky to have her looking after things." Elaine's laugh was soft and measured. She reached to refill Adler's cup, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "We all do our part." Richard watched, his stomach knotting. She was flawless, every gesture rehearsed. To Adler, she was the perfect wife, the caretaker. The darkness of the storage room, the slap he'd witnessed, the cruel words, they were invisible here. When Adler finally left, tipping his cap, Elaine turned to Richard. Her face lost its brightness, replaced by something sharper. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "See, people trust me. They see me as steady, kind. A woman who has stepped into a difficult role and given stability. Do you understand now? Your neighbors, your colleagues, the court, they'll all see me that way too." Richard's hands curled into fists. "Behind closed doors, I know the truth. And what will you do with it?" she countered. Her eyes glittered in the low light. "A video here, a child's sketch there? Evidence can be interpreted, but reputation shapes the verdict before the gavel ever falls." Her tone was calm, but her words slithered through the air. It wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. Upstairs, Lucky barked sharply. Richard's chest tightened. He left the kitchen, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Anna was sitting up in bed, eyes wide. She pointed toward the hall. A folded slip of paper lay at her side. Richard picked it up. Another drawing, this time of a car, its headlights' beams scribbled in heavy black strokes. In the back seat, a stick-figure child with a sad face. Beside it, the word, "Take." Richard sat on the bed's edge. "Did she say something, Anna?" "She didn't speak. only pressed closer to Lucky. Her silence was answer enough. He stroked her hair, whispering, "No one's taking you anywhere, not while I'm here." But even as he said it, his chest tightened with unease. The word take lingered in his mind. Later that night, after Anna finally drifted into fitful sleep, Richard found Clara in the hallway. She was wringing her hands, eyes darting nervously toward the stairs. "Mr. Cole," I overheard her on the phone again. "Mrs. Cole," she mentioned leaving. Something about moving Anna before the weekend. I didn't catch it all, but Richard steadied his voice. "You did the right thing telling me. We'll be ready." As he walked back toward his study, Lucky padded beside him, ears perked. Richard checked the hallway camera footage. Elaine had been on the phone at 11:07, pacing by the window. The audio wasn't clear, but fragments carried through. "Documents. Pike will sign. He won't stop me." The storm outside intensified. Lightning flashed, illuminating the estate in stuttering white light. For a moment, Richard caught his own reflection in the glass. A man haunted, tired, but resolved. In the early hours, he dozed in the leather chair of his study, only to be jolted awake by Lucky's growl. The clock read 2:15 a.m. The dog's fur bristled as he darted toward the front hall. Richard rose quickly, heart hammering. Downstairs, he caught sight of Elaine moving swiftly through the foyer, a coat draped over her arm, her phone pressed to her ear. The back door was slightly ajar. Richard stepped into view. "Where are you going?" She didn't flinch. Her expression was smooth, practiced. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd take a drive. At 2 in the morning?" With Anna's drawing sitting upstairs saying, "Take?" His voice cut through the still air. Elaine's eyes narrowed. "You're becoming paranoid." Richard took a step closer. "Try me. Try to take her. But know this, every step you take is recorded. Every word, every threat. You don't get to hide anymore." For the first time, he saw something flicker in her gaze, fear, or perhaps calculation adjusting its course. She let the coat fall back over the chair, set her phone on the table, and smiled thinly. "If you think cameras make you stronger than me, you don't understand how this game is played." She brushed past him, her perfume lingering in the air as she ascended the stairs. Richard stood frozen, pulse racing. He knew she was planning something bigger, something soon. The storm outside raged on, wind rattling the windows, rain drumming against the roof. He returned to Anna's room and stood in the doorway. She was still asleep, her small hand resting on Lucky's back. The dog raised his head, ears twitching, eyes alert. Richard whispered into the dark, more to himself than anyone else. "Not this time. She won't win this time." He lingered until the storm eased and dawn broke faint and gray. The first light touched Anna's face, and Richard felt the weight of the night settle into something harder, sharper, determination. Elaine had made her threat clear, subtle as it was. Now it was his turn to prepare. Rain pattered steadily against the tall windows, blurring the view of the manicured gardens. Richard sat in the study late that evening, the glow of his laptop screen painting his face in cold light. The truth folder had grown heavier drawings, photos, videos, audio, yet still, the weight pressing against his chest told him it wasn't enough. Elaine's power came not from truth but from charm, from her uncanny ability to look every inch the refined, compassionate wife when outsiders glanced in. He knew that charm could twist into a weapon the moment he challenged her. Anna had gone to bed hours earlier, curled beneath a thick quilt with Lucky curled at her feet. Richard had read her a story, his voice gentle but tight, his mind not on the words. She hadn't spoken, only traced the outline of the dog's fur with her small fingers, eyes distant. Each night, her silence screamed louder. Downstairs, the sound of laughter broke the quiet. Richard stood and walked toward the kitchen. Elaine was there, radiant in silk, entertaining Mr. Adler, their neighbor from 2 doors down. The old man, in his Yankees cap and thick winter coat, sat at the island with a steaming cup of coffee, chuckling at something Elaine had just said. "Oh, Richard," Elaine exclaimed brightly when she saw him. "You know George Adler, of course." He stopped by to check in after seeing the lights. I told him you've been working too hard. Richard forced a polite smile, shaking Adler's hand. The neighbor's eyes were kind, though they darted toward Elaine with a look of admiration. This one, Adler said, chuckling. She keeps the whole block running. We're lucky to have her looking after things. Elaine's laugh was soft and measured. She reached to refill Adler's cup, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. We all do our part. Richard watched, his stomach nodding. She was flawless, every gesture rehearsed. To Adler, she was the perfect wife, the caretaker. The darkness of the storage room, the slap he'd witnessed, the cruel words, they were invisible here. When Adler finally left, tipping his cap, Elaine turned to Richard. Her face lost its brightness. Replaced by something sharper, she leaned against the counter, arms crossed. See? People trust me. They see me as steady, kind, a woman who has stepped into a difficult role and given stability. Do you understand now? Your neighbors, your colleagues, the court, they'll all see me that way too. Richard's hands curled into fists. Behind closed doors, I know the truth. And what will you do with it? She countered. Her eyes glittered in the low light. A video here, a child sketch there. Evidence can be interpreted, but reputation shapes the verdict before the gavel ever falls. Her tone was calm, but her words slithered through the air. It wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. Upstairs, Lucky barked sharply. Richard's chest tightened. He left the kitchen, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Anna was sitting up in bed, eyes wide. She pointed toward the hall. A folded slip of paper lay at her side. Richard picked it up, another drawing this time of a car, its headlights beams scribbled in heavy black strokes. In the back seat, a stick-figure child with a sad face. Beside it, the word, take. Richard sat on the bed's edge. Did she say something, Anna? She didn't speak, only pressed closer to Lucky. Her silence was answer enough. He stroked her hair, whispering, "No one's taking you anywhere. Not while I'm here." But even as he said it, his chest tightened with unease. The word take lingered in his mind. Later that night, after Anna finally drifted into fitful sleep, Richard found Clara in the hallway. She was wringing her hands, eyes darting nervously toward the stairs. "Mr. Cole." I overheard her on the phone again. "Mrs. Cole," she mentioned leaving. Something about moving Anna before the weekend. I didn't catch it all, but Richard steadied his voice. "You did the right thing telling me. We'll be ready." As he walked back toward his study, Lucky padded beside him. Ears perked. Richard checked the hallway camera footage. Elaine had been on the phone at 11:07, pacing by the window. The audio wasn't clear, but fragments carried through. Documents. Pike will sign. He won't stop me. The storm outside intensified. Lightning flashed, illuminating the estate in stuttering white light. For a moment, Richard caught his own reflection in the glass. A man haunted, tired, but resolved. In the early hours, he dozed in the leather chair of his study, only to be jolted awake by Lucky's growl. The clock read 2:15 a.m. The dog's fur bristled as he darted toward the front hall. Richard rose quickly, heart hammering. Downstairs, he caught sight of Elaine moving swiftly through the foyer, a coat draped over her arm, her phone pressed to her ear. The back door was slightly ajar. Richard stepped into view. "Where are you going?" She didn't flinch. Her expression was smooth, practiced. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd take a drive. At 2 in the morning, with Anna's drawing sitting upstairs saying take?" His voice cut through the still air. Elaine's eyes narrowed. "You're becoming paranoid." Richard took a step closer. "Try me. Try to take her. But know this, every step you take is recorded. Every word. Every threat. You don't get to hide anymore. Miger." For the first time, he saw something flicker in her gaze, fear, or perhaps calculation adjusting its course. She let the coat fall back over the chair, set her phone on the table, and smiled thinly. "If you think cameras make you stronger than me, you don't understand how this game is played." She brushed past him, her perfume lingering in the air as she ascended the stairs. Richard stood frozen, pulse racing. He knew she was planning something bigger, something soon. The storm outside raged on, wind rattling the windows, rain drumming against the roof. He returned to Anna's room and stood in the doorway. She was still asleep, her small hand resting on Lucky's back. The dog raised his head, ears twitching, eyes alert. Richard whispered into the dark, more to himself than anyone else. Not this time. She won't win this time. He lingered until the storm eased and dawn broke faint and gray. The first light touched Anna's face, and Richard felt the weight of the night settle into something harder, sharper, determination. Elaine had made her threat clear, subtle as it was. Now it was his turn to prepare. The morning after the storm carried with it a brittle calm. Sunlight filtered weakly through the clouds, casting a pale glow across the Cole estate. Richard stood in the driveway, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the workers he'd called install additional cameras along the perimeter of the house. A white van was parked by the gate, its logo a generic security company name, but inside the equipment was top tier, ordered overnight and delivered by men who knew discretion. He directed them with brisk efficiency. One above the garage, another covering the rear door, and inside hallways, kitchen, mudroom. I want every entrance covered. Continuous recording. The lead technician nodded, scribbling notes on a clipboard. All footage backed up to a cloud server. Password, protected, encrypted. Only you will have access. Richard's gaze swept the property. Elaine had gone out early for her yoga class, or so she claimed. Clara had taken Anna to school. For the moment, he had the house to himself, and he intended to fortify it. When the technicians left, Richard sat at the kitchen island with his laptop. He logged into the new security feed. A split screen bloomed across the display. The driveway, the kitchen, the main hallway, the back door. In each corner, the red glow of recording, silent witnesses, glass eyes that did not blink. For a moment, he allowed himself to exhale. Then he opened the truth folder and reviewed the files again. The drawing labeled No Light. The video of Elaine dragging Anna into the storage room. Clara's whispered recording. Each piece gnawed at him with equal parts sorrow and fury. He knew the folder was becoming more than a record. It was a shield. One he would need when Elaine finally made her move. That evening, Anna sat at the island coloring quietly while Lucky sprawled beneath her chair. Richard leaned over her shoulder, watching her draw. This time it was not cages or cars, but a house with a lamp in the window and two figures inside. He pointed gently. "Who's that?" She tapped the taller figure, then him, the smaller one, herself. Above the house, she drew a wide circle of yellow crayon, brighter than the rest of the page. Richard swallowed hard. "The light stays on," he whispered, mostly to himself. Elaine entered then, her gym bag slung casually over her shoulder. Her eyes flicked to the drawing and lingered. She smiled, but it was tight, brittle. "Bedtime soon." "Anna," the girl froze, crayon slipping from her fingers. Lucky growled low, a sound almost too quiet to catch. Richard placed a hand on Anna's shoulder. "Finish your picture," he said calmly. Elaine's smile faltered for a beat before she turned and glided upstairs. Later, after tucking Anna into bed, Richard returned to his study. His phone buzzed. A familiar name lit the screen. Detective Nathan Harris. "Richard," Harris said, his voice steady. "I got your message. It's been a while." "It has." Richard hesitated, then spoke with the weight of resolve. "I need help. It's Anna. My wife is hurting her. I've got recordings, drawings, witness accounts. It's worse than I realized." Silence hummed on the line. Then Harris's tone shifted. "Professional. You know I can't ignore that. Send me what you have. I'll review it discreetly first. But once I log it officially, there's no pulling back." "I don't want to pull back." Richard leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "I want her safe. I don't care what it costs me." "Good," Harris said. "But understand Elaine will fight, and if she's already planting a narrative, You're in for a storm. Courts weigh appearances as much as evidence. We'll need to be precise. I know. Richard closed his eyes. I'll get you everything. They agreed to meet in the city the following evening. Richard hung up and sat in silence. The decision felt like crossing a line. There was no more hesitation, no more waiting for another drawing or bruise to surface. He had stepped fully into the fight. That night, he reviewed the live feeds again before bed. In the dim glow of the monitors, he saw Elaine pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, though the audio didn't reach him. He read the tension in her shoulders. Her hand clenched the counter, knuckles white, before she abruptly ended the call and slammed the phone down. She stood there a long moment, breathing hard, then turned and looked straight into the camera lens. For an instant, Richard felt as if she knew. The next morning, Clara brought Anna to school early. Richard drove separately, planning to head straight to his office in Manhattan afterward. At the school gate, Miss Turner stopped him. Her voice was low, urgent. Mr. Cole, Anna had another episode today. She wouldn't go near the cafeteria food. She just sat there, staring at her tray. When I asked what was wrong, she drew another box. This one had the word "take" again. Richard felt his stomach knot. Thank you for telling me. I'm handling it. Her eyes searched his. Please, don't let this drag on. Driving into the city, Richard replayed her words. He knew he had limited time before Elaine escalated. The guardianship papers Lowell had brought, the late-night calls, the drawings, they all pointed to one conclusion. She intended to take Anna away. At his office, he compiled the files into a compressed folder labeled Case. He encrypted it and transferred it to a secure drive. He would hand it to Harris himself, but as he watched the progress bar inch forward, a chill slid down his spine. If Elaine sensed what he was doing, she would move faster. That evening, back at the estate, Elaine served dinner with forced brightness. Anna, darling, eat up. Chicken, just how you like it. Anna pushed the food around her plate, silent. Richard noticed her hand tremble. Elaine's eyes flicked to him, challenging. See? She rejects kindness. I try. And she resists. Richard's voice was even. Maybe she knows the difference between kindness and control. Elaine's fork clattered against her plate. She rose abruptly. I won't be made a villain in my own home. She left the dining room, heels striking sharp against the hardwood. Anna's gaze lifted timidly to Richard's. He reached across the table, covered her small hand with his. You don't have to eat anything you don't want to, he said softly. Lucky thumped his tail once against the floor, as if in agreement. Later that night, Richard prepared a small bag with the secure drive and printed copies of the drawings. He placed them carefully in his briefcase. Tomorrow, Harris would have everything. As he clicked the lock shut, the camera monitor flickered. Elaine appeared in the hallway, moving quietly, almost stealthy, pausing outside Anna's bedroom door. She didn't enter, but she stood there for a long time, hand on the knob, her silhouette sharp in the glow of the nightlight. Richard watched from the study, every muscle tense, until she finally turned and walked away. He leaned back, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The house was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt like calm. It felt like the pause before a storm breaks. The city's rhythm beat differently than the quiet hush of the estate. Horns blared in traffic, the rumble of subway tunnels carried underfoot, and neon lights flickered across rain-wet streets. Richard walked quickly through Midtown Manhattan, his briefcase tight in his grip. Inside, the drive and documents waited like loaded weapons, though he wished he never needed to carry them at all. His meeting with Detective Harris would be at a diner just a block from the precinct-neutral ground, private enough. He entered, the bell above the door jingling. The smell of frying bacon and coffee hit him. Harris was already there, in a corner booth, his broad frame in a dark blazer. He looked up, gave a short nod, and gestured for Richard to slide in. Been a long time, Harris said, his voice steady but not unkind. I read about your last foundation project. Cameras caught you shaking hands with half the mayor's office. Funny how life works. Richard forced a tight smile. Life doesn't stay in headlines. Sometimes it ends up in dark rooms. He set the briefcase on the table, clicked it open, and slid the drive across. This is everything: drawings, photos, audio, footage, proof. Harris studied him for a long moment, then slipped the drive into his pocket. You're sure you want this official? Once I put it into the system, Elaine will know. She'll lawyer up harder, maybe faster than you expect. Richard leaned forward. I don't care if she unleashes the entire legal machine. I can't let Anna keep living like that. Harris nodded, pulling a legal pad closer. Tell me everything from the beginning. For the next hour, Richard laid it out. The chipped bowl, the slap, the flies in the food, the drawings, Clara's recording, the late-night calls with Lowell, the word take scrawled over and over again. Harris listened, occasionally jotting notes, his expression unreadable. When Richard finished, silence lingered between them, broken only by the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Harris finally spoke. What you've got is strong. Not airtight, but strong. Enough for CPS to open an emergency file. Enough for us to push a family court hearing. And with Pike involved in medical fraud, he exhaled, shaking his head. This could get ugly fast. I'm ready, Richard said. Harris studied him again, eyes narrowing slightly. I've seen men with money panic once this starts. Public image, boardroom pressure, reputation, suddenly the fight costs too much. You don't strike me as the type to walk away. But I need to hear you say it. Richard's jaw tightened. I'm not walking away. She's my daughter. Satisfied, Harris closed the pad. I'll log this tonight. Expect contact from ACS within the next 2 days. Meanwhile, don't confront Elaine again. Don't tip her off, you've gone to law enforcement. Richard nodded, though he knew concealment would grow harder. Elaine was already suspicious. As he left the diner and stepped into the cold evening air, his phone buzzed. A text from Clara. She's in the storage room again. Anna's crying. Adrenaline spiked. He flagged a cab and gave the driver the estate's address. Traffic was brutal. Every red light stretching his nerves thinner. When he finally rushed through the front door, the sound of muffled sobs drew him like a magnet. He strode down the hall and pushed the storage room door open. Elaine spun toward him, her hand gripping Anna's thin arm. The child's face was pale, streaked with tears. On the dusty floor beside her, she had traced a word with her fingertip. The letters trembled, crooked but unmistakable. The smallest word, yet heavier than any proof Richard had carried to the diner. Richard, Elaine said coolly, her voice already measured, her posture relaxed. You're home early. She refused dinner again. I told you, she has to learn. Richard's gaze locked on the word on the floor. He pulled his phone from his pocket and, without breaking eye contact, snapped a photo. Elaine's eyes flicked to the lens, then back to him. Evidence, he said softly. Elaine's smile hardened. And what will you do with it? Parade it in court? All they'll see is a little girl with big feelings. You'll look desperate, unstable, maybe unfit yourself. Anna clung to his leg, sobbing silently. Richard gathered her up in his arms, holding her close. Then let them see. I'm done hiding what happens in this house. Elaine stepped forward, voice low. You'll regret this, Richard. You'll lose more than you think. I've already lost enough, he answered, carrying Anna out of the room. He shut the door behind him, the click of the lock sounding final. Upstairs, he settled Anna into her bed, Lucky jumping up to curl protectively beside her. He whispered, "You're safe now. I promise." She looked at him, eyes wide, and reached for a pencil and paper. Her small hand scratched quickly. Then she turned it to him. 3 words, crooked but clear. "I trust Dad." Richard felt his throat close. He kissed her forehead gently and tucked the paper into his pocket. Later, in the study, he uploaded the new photo and the written note into the truth folder. The case was no longer just evidence. It was Anna's voice, silent yet undeniable, screaming through drawings, single words, scraps of paper. He stared at the monitor, the split-screen feeds showing each hallway. In one frame, Elaine moved through the kitchen, her face calm, a glass of wine in her hand. She paused suddenly, turning toward the camera, her gaze lingering. Then she raised the glass in a mocking toast before leaving the frame. Richard leaned back, his body tense. He realized she wasn't simply trying to control Anna anymore. She was taunting him too, daring him to keep pushing, daring him to believe he could win. He whispered into the dim room, voice raw. "It's not me you have to fear. It's the truth. And it's coming." The knock came just after 9 the following morning, crisp and official, echoing through the grand foyer like the strike of a gavel. Richard descended the stairs, his pulse steady but sharp, knowing this was the consequence of the folder he had handed over to Detective Harris. When he opened the door, 2 figures stood there, a woman in a gray overcoat holding a clipboard, and a man in a dark suit with the kind of quiet authority that comes from law enforcement. "Mr. Cole?" the woman asked. Her tone was professional but not unkind. "I'm Angela Martinez with ACS Child Protective Services. This is Detective Harris. We need to speak with you about your daughter, Anna." Richard stepped aside. "Come in." The house felt different with them inside, the air heavier, charged with the presence of scrutiny. Elaine appeared from the sitting room, her expression composed, dressed impeccably in a navy dress that gave her the aura of someone ready for a charity luncheon. She offered a polite smile. "Officers, welcome. I wasn't aware we were expecting company." Angela returned the smile, cool and measured. "We're here on official business, Mrs. Cole. We've received reports of possible neglect. We'll need to speak with both of you, and with Anna." Elaine's eyebrows arched, her voice a careful blend of surprise and wounded pride. "Neglect? That's absurd. Anna has everything she could possibly want: education, a beautiful home, every opportunity. I've dedicated myself to her well-being." Richard felt his fists clench, but Harris caught his eye and gave a subtle shake of his head. This was not the time to lash out. Angela set her clipboard on the table. "We'll need to see Anna privately if possible." Richard led them upstairs, pausing outside Anna's door. He knocked gently, opened it. Anna was sitting on the floor with Lucky, coloring. When she saw the strangers, she stiffened, her hand freezing mid-crayon. Richard crouched beside her. "It's okay, sweetheart. These people just want to make sure you're safe." Angela knelt, her voice soft. "Hi, Anna. My name is Angela. Can we talk for a little while?" Anna looked to Richard. He gave a reassuring nod. She didn't speak, but after a moment, she placed the crayon down and reached for a piece of paper. Her small hands moved quickly, and she slid the sheet toward Angela. On it was a box, a stick figure inside, and the word "NO" written 3 times in shaky letters. Angela's eyes softened. She looked up at Richard, then at Harris. "Thank you, Anna," she said gently. "That helps a lot." Elaine's voice cut in from the doorway. "Really, this is unnecessary. She's imaginative, yes, but children draw strange things all the time. To build a case from doodles seems reckless." Harris spoke, calm but firm. "Mrs. Cole, we'll also be reviewing physical evidence. This isn't about a single drawing." Downstairs, Angela asked to see the kitchen and the storage room. Richard's stomach tightened as he led them to the narrow door at the back hall. Elaine tried to interject. "That room is hardly used. It's just for storage," but Harris gestured for her to step aside. The door creaked open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mildew. On the floor lay the chipped bowl Richard hadn't yet removed, the dried remnants of spoiled oatmeal clinging to the sides. Angela crouched, examining it, her face impassive. Then her eyes moved to the corner, where faint lines traced in dust still spelled the word "help." Richard spoke quietly. "I found her here, twice, and I have video proof." Elaine let out a laugh, brittle and forced. "Video? Installed without my knowledge? That seems a violation of privacy, doesn't it?" Harris ignored her. "We'll need copies of all recordings, Mr. Cole. Chain of custody will start today." Richard nodded. "I'll provide them." Angela straightened. "This constitutes enough concern for an emergency file. We'll proceed with a preliminary hearing. Elaine's composure cracked for the first time. Her eyes flashed. A hearing? Over what dust in a dirty bowl? This is outrageous. Angela met her gaze evenly. Ma'am, we'll let the judge decide what's outrageous. After they left, the house settled into silence once more, but it was not the same silence. It was the silence of an open wound, of truths pulled into daylight. Richard found Anna back in her room, clutching Lucky. She looked at him, eyes wide, waiting for reassurance. He sat beside her. They believe you, Anna. They saw. It's not just you and me anymore. She reached for a scrap of paper and wrote a single word, light. Then she drew a lamp above it, shining down on two small stick figures. Richard felt his throat tighten. He kissed the top of her head. Yes, light. That's what we're bringing in now. Later that night, Elaine cornered him in the study. Her smile was gone. Her eyes sharp. You think this will end well for you? That they'll take your side? You underestimate me, Richard. I have friends. I have influence. I'll paint you as an unstable man, desperate to control a narrative. When I'm finished, you'll look like the danger. Richard stood, facing her squarely. I don't care what story you spin. I have the truth. And the truth doesn't need to rehearse. Her voice dropped, venom in each syllable. If you push this, you'll lose everything. Not just her. He held her gaze, unflinching. The only thing I can't lose is Anna. And I won't. She turned sharply, storming out of the room, her heels striking like hammers against the polished floor. Richard returned to his laptop. Uploading the newest photo, the dust-scratched help. Still visible in the storage room, he saved it under the growing archive. The truth folder no longer felt like his creation. It felt like Anna's voice, preserved in pixels and ink, louder than her silence ever could be. As midnight settled, Richard walked through the house, checking each camera's red light, each lens reflecting back at him. The glass eyes were wide open now, watching everything. Elaine's threats echoed in his ears, but he let them fade. He thought only of Anna's last drawing, of the word light in crooked letters, a lamp shining on them both. He whispered into the quiet hall, as though she could hear him from upstairs. The light stays on. The night felt unnaturally still. Richard sat in the study with the monitors glowing, the house's many hallways split across his screen like pieces of a puzzle. He had stayed late in the city after meeting Harris and ADA Kim, going through strategies for the upcoming emergency hearing. By the time he returned to Westchester, Anna was already asleep. Clara had left a note on the counter. She ate soup, drew another house with a lamp, slept quickly. Safe tonight. Richard had carried that note into his study, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the truth folder. But as the minutes ticked past midnight, his nerves refused to calm. Lucky stirred first. From the feed, Richard saw the dog in the upstairs hallway, head up, ears pricked. Then came the muffled sound, faint but unmistakable. Barking, frantic and urgent. He bolted from the chair and hurried toward the stairs. By the time he reached the mudroom, the barking had grown louder, claw scratches against wood echoing in the narrow corridor. He opened the door. Lucky bounded out, nails clicking, tail stiff, rushing toward the back of the house. Richard followed quickly, the cold tile under his feet, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of the stove clock, and then he saw her, Elaine, standing by the back door, coat thrown over her shoulders, car keys in one hand. In the other, she held Anna's wrist. The little girl wore pajamas, her eyes glazed with fear and confusion, her body stiff as she resisted the pull. Richard's chest went tight. Let her go. Elaine turned, her expression infuriatingly calm. She woke from a nightmare. I thought a drive might soothe her. At 2 a.m? Richard stepped closer. Voice low but sharp. You're not taking her anywhere. Anna whimpered, clutching the edge of the doorframe with her free hand. Lucky growled, teeth bared, stepping between them. Elaine tightened her grip, her smile brittle. You're paranoid, Richard. If you want to keep playing the role of the concerned father, fine. But don't make a scene in front of her. She's terrified, Richard said. Look at her. Anna's small fingers trembled against the wood. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She only shook her head, eyes pleading. Richard reached into his pocket and pressed a button on his phone. The hallway camera light blinked faintly from above. "This is being recorded," he said. Every second. Elaine froze. For the first time, the mask slipped. Her grip loosened enough for Anna to dart free. The girl ran straight to Richard, burying her face against his chest, her tiny shoulders shaking. Lucky barked, a sharp explosion of sound that filled the kitchen. Richard placed a steady hand on Anna's back and stared at Elaine. "Try this again. And it won't just be CPS knocking. It'll be a squad car." Her eyes flared, but she said nothing. She set the keys down slowly on the counter, turned, and walked upstairs without a word. Richard carried Anna into the living room, away from the tension still vibrating in the air. He settled her on the couch, wrapped her in a blanket, and stroked her hair until her breathing slowed. Lucky curled protectively at her side. For a long time, Richard sat there, his heart pounding, his mind replaying the image of Elaine pulling Anna into the night. At dawn, he called Harris. The detective answered groggily but alert. "What happened?" "She tried to take her. In the middle of the night. I have footage." Anna's reaction. Lucky's bark. "It's all there. Send me the clip," Harris said. "We'll add it to the evidence. This strengthens your case, but it also means she's escalating. Don't let Anna out of your sight." Richard sent the file, then hung up. He looked at Anna, still sleeping on the couch, the blanket rising and falling with each soft breath. He realized he could no longer treat Elaine's schemes as posturing. This was action, and it was dangerous. Later that morning, Clara brought in breakfast. She gasped softly when she saw Anna on the couch. Richard explained in clipped words. Clara's face went pale. "She'll try again, sir." "You know she will. You mustn't leave Anna alone." "I won't," Richard said. By noon, the tension in the house had curdled. Elaine came downstairs dressed immaculately, as though the night had been erased from her memory. She poured herself coffee, flipping through her phone, her tone casual. "We can't keep living like this, Richard. You turning the house into a prison, cameras in every corner," the staff whispering. "It's unsustainable." Richard kept his eyes on her. "Then maybe it's time we admitted the truth. We don't have a marriage. We have a war." Her lips curved faintly. "Wars have winners and losers. They also have casualties," Richard said. He thought of Anna, asleep in the next room, and his voice hardened. "I won't let her be one." That night, after Anna was finally in bed, Richard reviewed the footage again. The recording was clear. Elaine tugging Anna toward the door, the child's resistance, Lucky's frantic barking, the moment Anna broke free. He clipped the segment, labeled it "Attempted Extraction," and saved it into the truth folder. He also backed it up to a secure server Harris had provided. For hours, he sat staring at the frozen image of Anna clutching the doorframe, her face caught in the grainy still. The look of desperation carved into her features haunted him. He could no longer deny the obvious. Elaine wasn't just cruel. She was desperate, cornered, willing to risk anything. Just past midnight, Richard heard footsteps again. He tensed, rushing to the monitor. Elaine was pacing the living room, phone pressed to her ear. He zoomed in, lip-reading fragments. "Lowell. It failed. Need stronger leverage. Custody still possible." She stopped, hand trembling slightly as she gripped the phone tighter. "I'll take her out of here if I have to." Richard recorded the footage, saved it with the rest. He leaned back in the chair, exhaustion pressing into his bones, but resolve burning sharper than ever. Tomorrow would bring another round lawyers, CPS, the gathering storm of court. But tonight, he whispered a promise into the quiet glow of the monitor. "She stays here. She stays with me." Upstairs, Lucky stirred and settled back down beside Anna's bed. The child slept on, unaware of the battles fought in the shadows to keep her safe, and Richard Cole, watching through glass eyes that never blinked, knew the war was far from over, but the truth was catching up fast. The rain returned 2 nights later, hammering the roof in steady sheets, rattling the windows of the Cole estate as though the storm itself wanted to get in. Richard sat in the study, monitors glowing, the house divided into squares of light and shadow. Anna had gone to bed early, clutching Lucky tight, exhausted after another day of whispers at school and careful questions from Miss Turner. Clara had tiptoed out quietly after tidying the kitchen, her worried glance lingering on Richard before she left for the night. The house felt fragile, as if every wall and window knew it was holding a secret. Richard's chest ached with the weight of it. He sipped coffee, gone cold, watching the flicker of red dots across his screens. He wanted the storm to pass, for the silence to mean safety. But when Lucky suddenly lifted his head upstairs and barked, low and urgent, Richard's heart dropped. He shifted to the camera feed. The hallway outside Anna's room glowed in grainy black and white. Elaine was there. She moved quickly, deliberate, her coat pulled tight, her hair tied back. She opened the door with quiet precision, stepped inside, and moments later emerged again, Anna in her arms, limp and half asleep, a blanket wrapped around her small frame. Richard's blood roared in his ears. He was on his feet, racing through the halls before the rational part of his brain could catch up. By the time he reached the mudroom, Elaine was fumbling with the back door. The dark outline of her SUV glistened in the rain-soaked driveway, headlights already on. Anna stirred in her arms, murmuring faintly, trying to resist even in her drowsy state. Lucky bounded down the stairs, barking furiously, claws scraping against the floor. "Elaine," Richard's voice cracked like thunder. She froze, her shoulders stiffening. Slowly, she turned, her eyes hard, defiant. "She's my responsibility. She needs me. You don't understand her like I do." Richard stepped forward, the rain pelting harder against the glass door. "Put her down. Now." Elaine's grip tightened. "You think you can parade a few recordings in court and win? They'll believe me. They always believe the mother. I'm not going to let you ruin this family." "She's not a pawn in your game," Richard said, his voice low, steady. "She's a child, my child, and this ends tonight." Anna whimpered, struggling weakly. "Daddy," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. The word pierced through Richard like a blade. It was the first time she had spoken his name in weeks. Lucky lunged forward, growling, forcing Elaine to step back in alarm. The blanket slipped, and Anna's arms freed themselves. She reached out toward Richard, tears streaming down her face. Richard surged forward, grabbing her from Elaine's arms. He pulled her close against his chest, her small body trembling, her fingers clinging to his shirt. Elaine's eyes flared with rage. "You'll regret this. You don't know who you're fighting." Richard shifted Anna onto one hip and pulled his phone with his free hand. "Harris, now," he said into the receiver. "She tried to take her. I have it on camera. Get here." Elaine's composure cracked. For the first time, she looked less like the polished wife and more like someone cornered. Desperate, her gaze darted between Richard, Anna, and the glowing light of the hallway camera. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out into the rain, slamming the door behind her. Richard held Anna tightly, her sobs shaking against his chest. Lucky pressed against his leg, growling softly at the door, as if daring Elaine to return. Richard whispered into her hair, "You're safe. I've got you." Within minutes, headlights swept the driveway. Detective Harris arrived with 2 officers, their radios crackling softly. Richard handed Anna to Clara, who had rushed back after hearing the commotion, and guided Harris to the study. He pulled up the footage, the grainy video of Elaine carrying Anna down the hall, the SUV waiting in the rain, Lucky's furious bark. Harris watched in silence, jaw tight. When the clip ended, he exhaled. "This changes everything. I'll log it immediately. Ada Kim can use this in court. It's attempted removal. The judge won't take it lightly." Richard ran a hand over his face, exhaustion seeping into every muscle. "How soon until the hearing?" 2 days, Harris said, "but after this, I'll push for emergency custody to be granted sooner. She's escalating. You need a protective order." Richard nodded. "Do it. Whatever it takes." Harris left to file the report. Clara returned with Anna, who had fallen asleep again, worn out from the ordeal. Richard carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, and sat beside her until her breathing steadied. Lucky lay at her feet, vigilant even in slumber. In the dim glow of the nightlight, Richard stared at the small note Anna had left earlier that evening on her pillow. It was a single word in her uneven handwriting. Home. She had underlined it twice. Tears pricked his eyes. He reached out, brushed a curl from her forehead, and whispered, "Yes, this is your home. No one takes you from it." Downstairs, he returned to the study and saved the new clip into the truth folder, labeling it Attempted Extraction, 2:05 a.m. He backed it up to the secure drive Harris had set up. As the progress bar moved across the screen, Richard felt something shift inside him. For weeks, Elaine had controlled the shadows, twisting silence into her weapon. But now, the truth was spilling out, recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. For the first time, Richard felt the tide turning. The storm outside raged on, rain battering the windows like relentless fists. But inside the house, with Anna safe upstairs and the evidence secured, Richard felt a fragile flicker of hope. It was not victory yet, but it was something stronger than fear. He sat back in his chair, staring at the glowing screens, and whispered to himself, steady and certain, "She won't win. Not this time. Not ever again." The morning after the storm carried a strange quiet. The driveway was littered with wet leaves, the sky pale and washed out, as though the night had burned away all color. Richard stood by the kitchen window with a mug of untouched coffee, his reflection faint in the glass. Upstairs, Anna was still asleep, her breathing steady. Lucky curled at her side. For the first time in weeks, she hadn't woken from nightmares. But the silence downstairs was not peace, it was the pause before another round. Detective Harris arrived just after 8. He came in plain clothes, a leather jacket damp from drizzle, his expression tight. He set a folder on the counter. "We moved fast after last night. ADA Kim petitioned the judge before dawn. You have temporary emergency custody of Anna. Elaine cannot remove her from this house. Effective immediately." Richard exhaled, gripping the edge of the counter. "That's something. But it won't stop her from trying." Harris nodded. "That's why we're going further. We need her phone. We know she's been coordinating with Lowell and Dr. Pike. If we can extract call logs, messages, even financial transfers, it'll give us the chain we need to dismantle her narrative completely." Richard frowned. "How do we get it?" "We'll request a warrant by tonight," Harris said. "But until then, we need to know where she's keeping her backups. She's careful. Women like her always are. Multiple devices, maybe a cloud server, maybe even a safety deposit box. Anything you've seen? Odd behavior?" Richard thought back. Elaine's late-night calls, her careful walks through the hall, the way she stared into the cameras as though challenging him. She keeps a locked drawer in the master suite. She guards it like treasure. Harris scribbled it down. "I'll get my techs ready." They climbed the stairs. The master bedroom was immaculate. Sun cutting through white curtains, everything in its place. Harris knelt by the drawer, ran a small device across the lock, and within minutes, it clicked open. Inside were neatly stacked documents, 2 phones, and a flash drive in a silver case. Harris whistled softly. "She's sloppy, keeping this in the house." He slipped gloves on, carefully placing the items into evidence bags. "We'll run forensic imaging. If there's anything here calls with Lowell. False reports with Pike. Bank wires, we'll have it." Richard felt both relief and dread. Relief that proof was gathering. Dread that Elaine had been operating with such brazenness under his roof. As Harris packed the last bag, footsteps echoed from the hall. Elaine appeared in the doorway, her face calm, her dress perfectly pressed, a faint smile on her lips. "Going through my things, detective. How quaint." Harris stood, unshaken. "Mrs. Cole, you'll be receiving formal notice by this evening. Until then, these are secured under judicial order." Her smile tightened. "Judicial order? How efficient. You must think you've already won." She turned her gaze on Richard, her voice laced with venom beneath its polish. Do you really believe this little crusade will end in your favor? Judges don't like spectacle. They don't like billionaires crying victim, and when the press gets wind of this, she let the words hang, dangerous and deliberate. Richard stepped forward, his voice steady. When the press gets wind, they'll see your truth. Not mine. Elaine's eyes glittered. We'll see. With that, she turned and swept down the hall, every step controlled. As though even retreat was a performance. By noon, Harris was gone, evidence bags in hand. Richard spent the day at home, hovering near Anna, watching her draw quietly at the kitchen island. This time she sketched a tree with two figures beneath it, herself and him, stick hands joined. The sun above was huge, almost covering the page. She pushed it toward him shyly. Richard's chest tightened. "That's us," he whispered. She nodded once, eyes shining, then bent back to her crayons. That evening, Harris called. We pulled fragments already. Texts between Elaine and Lowell. Draft guardianship papers. Notes on how to undermine you in court. Discussions about Dr. Pike falsifying reports. It's a pattern. Enough to crush credibility. But the most damning piece, we found a transfer. Pike received $50,000 from an account tied to Elaine, labeled as a consulting fee. It's bribery, plain and simple. Richard gripped the phone, feeling the tide shift. Will it hold in court? With testimony from Pike under subpoena, yes. He'll fold the second he's pressured. People like him always do. Harris's voice hardened. We'll bring this to the emergency hearing. It won't just be about custody anymore. It'll be about fraud, coercion, endangerment. Richard hung up, pacing the study. The truth folder on his laptop was no longer just his archive. It was becoming a case file. An indictment. A future verdict. He glanced at the monitors. Elaine was in the living room, sipping wine, her posture relaxed, her smile faint. She looked, to any outside eye, like a woman in control. But Richard knew that control was cracking. Late that night, as he checked on Anna, she stirred and opened her eyes. "Daddy?" she whispered, voice groggy but clear. He froze, then smiled softly. "Yes, sweetheart." "Light stays on?" she murmured. He smoothed her blanket, brushing curls from her forehead. "Always." She drifted back to sleep, her small hand resting against Lucky's fur. Richard stood in the doorway, watching, his resolve harder than ever. The battle had left the shadows and entered the open. Elaine's lies were no longer whispers in the dark, they were written in texts, in bank wires, in the faces of those she had tried to manipulate, and soon, they would be written into judgment. The courthouse was an old stone building, its columns streaked with years of soot and rain. Richard stood at the base of the steps, briefcase in hand, the weight of the morning pressing down on his shoulders. Harris met him at the entrance, suit crisp, expression steady. "Remember," the detective said, "this isn't the trial. It's an emergency hearing. But if the judge sees what we've collected, it'll set the tone for everything that follows." Inside, the hallways buzzed with clerks, lawyers, and nervous families waiting their turn. Richard felt out of place in his tailored suit. The familiar armor of boardrooms, suddenly useless here. He wasn't negotiating a merger or defending a balance sheet, he was fighting for his daughter's safety. That thought steadied him more than it unsettled him. They entered the courtroom. The benches creaked with the weight of onlookers, though most were strangers waiting for their own hearings. At the front, Judge Morrison presided. His presence quiet, but formidable. Silver hair gleaming beneath the lights. He scanned the docket before looking up. Cole versus Cole, emergency custody petition. Let's proceed. Elaine was already seated at the respondent's table, flanked by Attorney Lowell. She looked immaculate in a cream suit, every hair in place. Her face serene. To any outsider, she was the picture of composure, a woman unfairly dragged into court. Richard's stomach twisted at the sight, but he sat tall at his own table, Harris and ADA Kim beside him. Kim opened. "Your Honor, this is not a case of simple marital dispute. We present evidence that misses. Elaine Cole has repeatedly endangered the child. Anna Cole, through acts of neglect, coercion, and attempted removal from her father's custody. We request immediate continuation of emergency custody for Mr. Cole pending full trial. Lowell rose smoothly. Your Honor, the allegations are exaggerated. The so-called evidence circumstantial. Mrs. Cole has been a devoted caregiver while Mr. Cole has been an absentee father, distracted by business. This is a campaign to discredit her, nothing more. The judge raised a hand. Let's see the evidence. Kim gestured to the clerk. Screens flickered to life at the front of the room. The first clip played the grainy footage of Elaine pulling Anna down the hallway, the child's hand clutching the doorframe, Lucky barking furiously. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Richard forced himself to watch, though his chest clenched at the sight. Next came Clara's audio recording. Elaine's voice rang through the speakers. "Eat what I give you, or you get nothing." The words were sharp, unmistakable. Richard glanced at the judge. Morrison's brow furrowed, his pen tapping lightly against the desk. Then came the text messages between Elaine and Dr. Pike. Projected on the screen, they left little room for interpretation. 50,000 wired as agreed. Guardianship must read as behavioral necessity. Pike's terse reply. We'll draft the report. Keep him distracted. Lowell objected. Text can be fabricated. Context is missing. Kim countered. Forensic imaging confirms authenticity. Metadata is intact. The financial transfer is documented from Mrs. Cole's account. That is not fabrication, it is fraud. Elaine shifted slightly in her chair, the first crack in her mask. Still, she forced a smile, whispering into Lowell's ear. Finally, Kim presented Anna's drawings. Each one was placed on the evidence table boxes. The word help, scrawled in crooked letters. The car marked take. The word home, underlined twice. And finally, the sun and lamp marked light. The drawings looked almost fragile under the harsh lights of the courtroom. Yet they carried more weight than any legal brief. Judge Morrison leaned forward, studying them. Children speak in the language they have, he murmured. These speak loudly. Lowell rose again, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, with respect, children's drawings are open to interpretation. Mrs. Cole has provided structure, routine, and care. What we're seeing is a child acting out grief over her late mother, manipulated by a father too eager to assign blame. Richard stood before Kim could stop him. Your Honor, with all respect, my daughter is not acting out. She's been silenced, locked in a room, fed spoiled food, and dragged toward cars in the middle of the night. Those drawings are not tantrums. They are testimony. His voice caught, but he forced it steady. She is 6 years old, and she found a way to tell the truth when no one else would listen. The courtroom was silent. Even Lowell hesitated before retaking his seat. Judge Morrison tapped his pen again, then set it down. The court finds sufficient grounds to extend emergency custody to Mr. Richard Cole. Furthermore, in light of the evidence presented, Mrs. Cole is prohibited from unsupervised contact with Anna pending further investigation. A full custody hearing will be scheduled. He looked directly at Elaine. And Mrs. Cole, any further attempts to remove the child without authorization will be considered abduction. Do I make myself clear? Elaine's lips curved into a brittle smile. Crystal. Your Honor. The gavel struck. The sound echoed through the room like the slam of a cell door. Outside the courthouse, Richard breathed deeply, the cold air stinging his lungs. Harris clapped a hand on his shoulder. It's not over. But today was a victory. Richard nodded, watching as Elaine descended the courthouse steps surrounded by Lowell and her assistants. She turned once, her gaze locking on him across the distance. Her smile was thin, sharp, promising the fight wasn't finished. He didn't flinch. He thought of Anna's last drawing, the lamp and the sun above them. He whispered under his breath, too low for anyone but himself to hear. The light stays on. No. When he returned to the estate that evening, Anna was waiting at the door, Lucky beside her. She didn't speak, just ran into his arms, clutching him with a fierceness that nearly broke him. He lifted her, holding her close, breathing in the scent of crayons and soap in her hair. You're safe, he said softly. The judge says you stay home. With me. Her small arms tightened around his neck. For the first time in weeks. Her lips formed a faint smile. She reached for a paper on the hallway table, one she had drawn while waiting. On it was a house. No boxes, no bars, no words scratched in fear. Just a sun, huge and yellow, covering the page. Richard felt tears sting his eyes. He kissed her forehead and whispered again, steady and certain. The light stays on, Anna. Always. The media vans were gone by dawn, their cables coiled, their cameras packed away, but their work remained scattered across screens, printed in headlines, whispered in neighborhoods. Philanthropist wife accused of abuse. One outlet had written, another, billionaire custody battle turns ugly. Elaine's smiling photo appeared alongside words like allegations and claims, while Richard's own face looked weary, stern, caught by a lens outside the courthouse. Richard sat at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, headlines fanned out, his coffee cold again. Anna colored quietly beside him, oblivious to the chaos she had been thrust into. Lucky lay at her feet, his breathing even, the faint thump of his tail, the only sound of ease in the house. Clara entered, her expression tense. Sir, the neighbors are talking. Some don't believe her. Some don't believe you. I overheard 2 women at the store say Anna should be taken away from both of you, until the truth comes out. Richard's chest tightened. That's exactly what Elaine wants. Confusion. Doubt. Well, Clara set a plate of toast on the table. Though none of them touched it, you'll have to fight harder now. Not just in court. Out there too. She gestured vaguely, meaning the public, the whispers, the world. Before Richard could reply, his phone buzzed. Harris. He stepped into the hall to answer. Elaine filed an emergency motion, Harris said flatly. She's asking for supervised visitation rights to begin immediately. Lowell claims denying her access damages her maternal bond. Richard closed his eyes. She almost took Anna from the house. Twice. And now she wants visits? It's tactical, Harris said. If the judge denies it, she'll cry persecution. If it's granted, she'll use it to spin her narrative. Either way, it's pressure. Richard paced, his voice sharp. And Anna? Kim will argue it's too soon, too dangerous. But prepare yourself. Judges sometimes compromise, even when they shouldn't. Richard hung up, his jaw tight. He returned to the table, forcing a calm smile for Anna. She handed him her new drawing. It was a storm cloud, dark scribbles across the page, but beneath it stood 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow umbrella. She tapped the larger figure him and then pressed her finger to the umbrella, circling it until the crayon tore the paper. Richard swallowed. I'll keep the umbrella up, sweetheart. I promise. That evening, after Anna was asleep, Elaine arrived unannounced. She rang the bell once, sharply, then stood on the porch as if she owned it still. Richard opened the door just enough to block her view inside. I came to see my daughter, she said smoothly, her voice carrying the cadence of someone who expected cameras. You can't keep her locked away from me. Richard's voice was quiet, but firm. The order says, no unsupervised contact. Orders change, she replied, her eyes glittering. Judges change, stories change. You think the truth is enough, but truth is pliable. And when I'm finished, people will see me as the victim, and you as the tyrant. Richard felt anger burn hot, but he held it back. Leave before I call Harris. She leaned in, her words low, venomous. You can keep stacking your folder of evidence, but remember this public opinion is a different courtroom, and I know how to win there. Then she turned sharply, her heels clicking against the stone path, disappearing into the night. Richard locked the door, leaning against it, the weight of her words settling like lead in his chest. The following morning, he met Harris and ADA Kim at the precinct. They spread documents across the table: financial transfers, Pike's falsified reports, Elaine's texts with Lowell. Kim tapped the papers. The case is strong legally. But Harris is right, she's playing 2 battles. One in court, one in the public eye. Richard exhaled. So what do we do? Kim's gaze was steady. We stay focused. Judges respond to proof, not press. Let Elaine burn her credibility with theatrics. You protect Anna, keep her safe. And we show the court the pattern of coercion. That's how we win. Back at the estate, the tension deepened. A letter arrived, slipped under the gate. A glossy flyer from a so-called support group, praising Elaine for her charity, calling her a model stepmother, urging neighbors to stand with her against false accusations. Richard crumpled it, his jaw aching from the force of his teeth. Clara shook her head. She's poisoning the well. Richard looked at Anna, who was playing with Lucky on the rug, her laughter soft but real. For a moment, it broke through the heaviness. He crouched, brushing her hair back, memorizing the sound. Then he whispered, more to himself than to her. Let her try. She can flood the world with lies. But the truth is right here. And it's stronger. That night, unable to sleep, Richard sat in the study, the glow of the monitors casting his face in blue. On the screen, Elaine appeared at the edge of the driveway. Her figure blurred by rain, she stood there for a long time, unmoving, as though daring him to see her. Then she turned and disappeared into the dark. Richard leaned back, exhaustion sinking into his bones. He thought of Anna's umbrella drawing, the fragile yellow shield against storms. He whispered into the empty room, steady despite the fear gnawing at him. The light stays on, the umbrella holds. The visitation center was a converted municipal building on the outskirts of White Plains, its walls painted in muted blues and yellows meant to soothe. The waiting room held a scattering of toys, picture books stacked on low shelves, and the faint hum of a vending machine in the corner. Richard sat on a hard plastic chair with Anna beside him. Lucky's absence, palpable animals weren't allowed inside. Anna clutched her sketchbook tight against her chest, her eyes darting nervously at every sound. Across the room sat the supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Miss Franklin. She had kind eyes but a clipboard that never left her lap. Her job was clear: monitor, record, remain impartial. Visits last 1 hour, she explained, her tone gentle but firm. All interactions must remain positive and safe. If I see anything inappropriate, I'll intervene. Richard nodded, though every fiber in him wanted to object to Anna being here at all. He leaned down, whispering, I'll be right here the whole time. Anna nodded once, but her grip on the sketchbook tightened until her knuckles whitened. The door opened. Elaine entered, immaculate as always. She wore a pale lavender dress, her hair styled perfectly, her perfume subtle but sharp in Richard's nose. She smiled warmly, as though stepping onto a stage. Anna, darling, she said, her arms opening wide. Anna froze. She glanced at Richard, then at Miss Franklin, then back at Elaine. Finally, slowly, she stood. Elaine crouched and wrapped her arms around her, the gesture theatrical. I've missed you so much, she whispered loudly enough for all to hear. But we're together now. Miss Franklin scribbled something on her clipboard. Elaine guided Anna toward the table with the coloring books and blocks. Shall we play? Her tone dripped with cheerfulness. Anna sat stiffly, flipping open her own sketchbook instead. She began drawing in small, careful lines. Elaine leaned closer, watching. What are you making, sweetheart? Anna didn't answer. She drew a figure under a large yellow sun, then added a smaller figure beside it. Without looking up, she tapped the taller one and whispered, almost inaudible, Daddy. Richard's chest tightened. Elaine's smile faltered for a flicker of a second, then returned, brighter, more brittle. Of course, Daddy is always in your pictures, isn't he? But don't forget me. I'm here too. She reached for a crayon, quickly sketching herself beside the figures, taller, larger, shading her dress in lavender to match her own outfit. Anna paused, then drew a crooked line separating Elaine's figure from the others. She shaded it dark. Richard swallowed hard, forcing himself not to intervene. Miss Franklin glanced up, her expression neutral, though her pen moved across the page. Elaine laughed lightly, children and their imagination. She turned to Miss Franklin. You see? She's playful, dramatic. These drawings, they mean nothing more than that. But her voice carried an edge, tight beneath the charm. For the next half hour, Elaine tried relentlessly reading from a picture book, stacking blocks, offering to braid Anna's hair. Anna responded with silence, occasionally glancing toward Richard as though anchoring herself. Each time, he gave her a small nod, steady and reassuring. Finally, Elaine shifted tactics. Her voice dropped slightly, though still loud enough to be overheard. "Anna, darling, would you like to come live with me for a while? We could decorate your own room, toys, dresses, anything you want." Anna froze, her crayon mid-stroke. Slowly, she wrote a single word on the page, number. The silence in the room was sharp, broken only by the hum of the vending machine. Miss Franklin cleared her throat. "Mrs. Cole, please refrain from discussing living arrangements. That's for the court to decide." Elaine's smile returned instantly, smooth as glass. "Of course. Just a little slip." She looked at Richard then, her eyes hard despite the curve of her lips. Richard met her gaze without blinking. The session ended 5 minutes later. Miss Franklin stood. "That will be all for today. Thank you." Elaine rose gracefully, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. She bent to kiss Anna's head, but the child turned, clutching Richard's arm instead. Elaine's smile held, but her eyes burned. "Until next time, darling," she said, before sweeping out of the room. Anna exhaled sharply, her small shoulders sagging with relief. She pressed the sketchbook against Richard's chest. On the page was her final drawing, a sun, 2 stick figures holding hands, and a thick, jagged line shutting out a third figure. Richard lifted her into his arms. "You did so well," he whispered. "So brave." Back at the estate, Clara served warm soup, her hands shaking slightly. "How was it?" she asked. Richard set Anna at the table and answered quietly, hard, but telling. She showed the truth without saying a word. Later that night, Harris called. Franklin's notes are strong. She recorded Elaine's inappropriate suggestion, Anna's refusal, the drawing. That goes straight into the record. Lowell will argue, but it won't hold. Richard looked across the room at Anna, who had fallen asleep on the couch with Lucky curled against her. Her sketchbook lay open beside her, the sun glowing bright across the page. He lowered his voice. She's speaking louder now, without even using her voice. Harris paused. "Children know more than we think, and they show it however they can." Richard closed his eyes, exhaustion pressing deep, but a flicker of hope warming through it. For the first time, the system was beginning to see what he had always known. Anna's truth wasn't hidden. It was written in every drawing, every whispered word, every gesture of fear and trust. As the storm outside eased into drizzle, Richard whispered the vow he had repeated so many times it was etched into him. The light stays on. The footage appeared 2 days later, spreading faster than Richard could keep up with. On morning television, in online tabloids, on social media feeds, it was everywhere. A grainy clip of Anna at the visitation center, Elaine leaning close, brushing a hand across her daughter's hair, smiling like a saint. The angle made Anna's stiffness look like shyness, her silence like the timidity of a child warming slowly to her mother. The clip ended just before the drawing of the word "no" appeared. Richard stood in the living room, the television blaring commentary. A panel of so-called experts debated over blurred images. One called Elaine a picture of maternal devotion under fire. Another suggested Anna was caught in the middle of adult conflict. Not one mentioned the darker truths left off camera. Clara muted the television with trembling hands. "Sir, they've cut it to pieces. They've made her look innocent." Richard's chest tightened. She must have bribed someone at the center. Someone leaked this, edited it, and fed it to the press. His phone buzzed. Harris's voice was clipped. "We saw it. Lowell's fingerprints are all over this. He's trying to control the narrative, make Elaine the victim again. But Franklin's full report is intact, untouched. That's what matters in court." Richard pinched the bridge of his nose. Court isn't the only battle. Public opinion's already shifting. Neighbors are whispering again. "I saw Adler across the street. He wouldn't even wave this morning. Harris was firm. Ignore the noise. Stick to the evidence. We'll subpoena whoever leaked this, and Franklin will testify. The judge won't be swayed by television edits. After the call, Richard sat heavily on the couch. Anna climbed beside him, her sketchbook in her lap. She didn't ask about the news she didn't need to. Children sensed storms without needing words. She began to draw, pressing the crayon hard until it nearly broke. When she slid the page to him, his throat tightened. It was a television screen. A smiling figure with bright hair. But behind the glass she had drawn dark claws stretching outward. Beneath it, she wrote one word. Lies. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. That's right, lies. But we'll show the truth. The next day, Lowell held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Elaine stood at his side, immaculate in navy blue, clutching a pearl rosary in her hands like a prop. Cameras flashed. Lowell spoke smoothly. My client, Mrs. Cole, has been subjected to baseless smears. The leaked footage shows the reality. A loving mother desperate to reconnect with her daughter. While others seek to poison that bond, we call on the public to recognize the injustice being done. Elaine dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, her timing impeccable. I only want to be a mother, she said into the microphones, her voice trembling just enough. Is that such a crime? Richard watched from the office television, his hands curled into fists. Ada Kim entered, shaking her head. Theatrics, nothing more. But it may influence jury pools if this escalates to criminal charges. We'll have to counter. How? Richard asked, his voice low. Kim laid a folder on the desk. With truth. We release Franklin's full report. Unedited, and when Pike flips, which he will, once we subpoena his bank records, the bribery will speak louder than tears on courthouse steps. Richard leaned back, exhaustion pressing in. And Anna? Kim softened. Keep her shielded from the noise. She's the heart of this, but she shouldn't have to carry the weight of it. That evening, back at the estate, Richard found Anna sitting on the floor with Lucky, building a tower of blocks. She glanced up at him, then whispered, Did she win? Richard crouched, brushing her hair back. Number, she made it look like she won. But the judge sees more than pictures. The judge sees everything. Anna nodded slowly, as though filing the thought away. She picked up her crayon again, drew the tower she had just built, and beneath it wrote one word. Stand. Richard kissed her forehead. That's what we'll do. We'll stand. Late that night, the monitors flickered again. Elaine stood at the edge of the driveway, her figure blurred by fog. She wasn't alone. Two men lingered near the car, silhouettes sharp in the glow of the headlights. Richard leaned closer to the screen, pulse quickening. After a few minutes, the car pulled away, leaving the driveway empty. He called Harris immediately. She's planning something. She's not just playing the media, she's meeting with people, late at night, at my gate. We'll increase patrols, Harris said. Stay vigilant. Don't leave Anna alone. Not even for a minute. When Richard finally collapsed into bed, exhaustion dragged at him. But sleep wouldn't come. He thought of Elaine's polished face on television, of Anna's small hand scrawling the word lies, of the dark silhouettes in the fog. The war was shifting again, into darker ground. He rose before dawn, checked on Anna, found her still curled with Lucky, breathing softly. On her nightstand lay her latest drawing. Two figures standing firm under a tower. The sun blazing above. The word stand etched bold across the bottom. Richard picked it up, held it in his hands as though it were scripture. He whispered into the stillness, his voice raw but resolute. We stand, no matter what lies come. The subpoena went out on a Thursday morning. Richard sat in Harris's office as Ada Kim handed over the document to a clerk for filing. Her tone was brisk, but her eyes gleamed with certainty. By tomorrow, Dr. Pike will be legally required to hand over all communications, financial statements, and medical records connected to Anna. If he resists, he faces contempt. My bet? He folds. Richard leaned forward. And when he folds, Elaine folds with him. Harris nodded. Exactly. Her whole defense rests on Pike's credibility. Take that away, and the scaffolding collapses. But Lowell was fast. By evening, Elaine's legal team filed motions to quash the subpoena. The claim was predictable, irrelevant, invasive, harassment of a respected professional. On the courthouse steps, Lowell delivered another performance for the cameras. This is an attempt to drag honorable men into a private family dispute. It will not stand. Elaine stood beside him again, pearl earrings catching the light, her hand resting dramatically on her chest. "All I want is for Anna to heal," she told reporters, her voice trembling. "I can't understand why anyone would question the word of her doctor." Richard watched the coverage from the estate, jaw tight. Clara muted the television. "Sir, she's good at this. Too good. She's disparity," Richard replied. "And desperation cracks eventually." The next day, cracks appeared. Pike arrived at the courthouse flanked by his attorney. Sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air, Kim intercepted him in the hallway. Her voice was calm, precise, but it cut like a scalpel. "Doctor, the subpoena stands. We have your bank records. 50,000 from Elaine's account. We also have your draft reports, marked up with her notes. If you fight, it becomes fraud and conspiracy. If you cooperate, it becomes a mistake you regretted. Which outcome do you prefer?" Richard stood nearby, watching Pike's composure unravel. His lips trembled, his eyes darting like a man searching for exits in a burning building. I never meant harm," he stammered. "She said it was for Anna's benefit. That the girl was unstable. That my report would help her get the treatment she needed." "Treatment?" Richard's voice broke sharp. "Locking a 6-year-old in a room and starving her isn't treatment." Pike flinched. His attorney tugged his arm, whispering furiously. But Kim pressed. "Doctor, you testify truthfully, and the DA's office will consider leniency. If not, you go down with her. Choose." By the end of the hour, Pike agreed. His statement was taken under oath. He admitted to falsifying notes, receiving the bribe, and drafting guardianship recommendations on Elaine's demand. The words went into the record like nails driven into wood. That evening, Harris called Richard. "She's cornered. Pike gave us everything. It's over for him. For her, this is the beginning of the end." Richard closed his eyes, relief mingling with exhaustion. "But she won't stop quietly." "No," Harris agreed. "Which makes her more dangerous." At the estate, Richard found Anna drawing again at the kitchen island. She looked up at him with solemn eyes and pushed the page toward him. It was a mask, an oval face with bright lips, wide eyes, but cracks running through it like shattered glass. Beneath, she had written one word in uneven letters: break. Richard swallowed, running a hand over her curls. "Yes," he murmured. "Her mask is breaking." 2 nights later, Elaine proved him right. It was past midnight when the alarm tripped. A sensor in the mudroom blinked red across Richard's monitor. He bolted upright, heart pounding. Lucky was already barking upstairs, claws scratching the floor as he rushed toward Anna's room. Richard grabbed the baseball bat he had kept hidden in the study and moved quickly down the hall. The monitor feed flickered. Elaine, dressed in black, her hair pulled tight, forcing the mudroom door with a spare key. She slipped inside with a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Richard's chest went cold. She wasn't just sneaking in to provoke. She had come for Anna. He moved silently, every step controlled. Elaine crept up the stairs, glancing toward Anna's room, but when she reached for the doorknob, Lucky exploded into a fury, growling and snapping, his body a wall of muscle between her and the door. Anna's frightened cry echoed from inside. Richard stepped into view, bat in hand. His voice was calm, steady, deadly serious. "Take one more step, Elaine, and you won't like what happens next." She froze, her chest heaving. Then she laughed, sharp and brittle. "You think this ends with your cameras and your folder of evidence? Judges bend, juries sway, reporters spin. I can still win." "Not anymore," Richard said. He lowered the bat, pulled out his phone, and hit dial. "Harris." She broke in. I have it on camera. Send a unit. Elaine's face contorted, rage breaking through the mask at last. You've ruined me, she hissed. You and that girl, she was supposed to be mine. She needed me. She needed love, Richard said quietly. Not control, and certainly not you. The flashing lights arrived minutes later. Officers poured into the house, Harris among them. Elaine was cuffed, her protests loud but empty now. A performance without an audience. As they led her out, Anna peeked from her bedroom, clutching Lucky's collar. Richard knelt, arms open. She ran to him, burying her face in his chest. He held her tight, whispering, "It's over. She can't hurt you anymore." But even as he said it, he knew the legal battle was far from finished. Courtrooms still awaited, verdicts still loomed. Yet in that moment, holding his daughter safe while Elaine was taken into the night, Richard felt the first true flicker of victory. Later, after the house was quiet again, Anna handed him one more drawing. A mask, cracked open, with the word "break" scrawled beneath. Beside it, she drew two stick figures under a blazing sun. Richard kissed her forehead. That's right, sweetheart. The mask is broken, and the light stays on. The courthouse brimmed with tension, every whisper ricocheting off the stone walls like echoes from another century. Reporters clustered on the steps outside, their microphones bobbing in the morning air. Inside, the gallery filled quickly neighbors, curious citizens, even distant relatives of Elaine's who had avoided the earlier hearings but came now to witness the conclusion. Richard sat at the petitioner's table, Harris just behind him, ADA Kim at his side. His briefcase rested against his leg, but he hadn't opened it. Everything he needed was already in the record, already planted like seeds ready for judgment. Across the aisle, Elaine sat beside Lowell. Her cream suit was pristine, her hair glossy, her makeup flawless. She still looked the part she had always played, perfect, composed, untouchable. But her eyes told another story, red from sleepless nights, rimmed with frustration she could no longer mask. Judge Morrison entered, robes flowing, face set in solemn lines. This court will now deliver its decision regarding custody of minor Anna Cole and the related criminal matters brought to light during these proceedings. The room hushed. Kim rose first. Your Honor, the evidence presented is not mere speculation. We have Dr. Pike's sworn testimony confirming bribery, falsified medical records, and collusion with Mrs. Cole. We have video evidence of attempted removal of the child in the middle of the night. We have recordings of verbal abuse, the child's drawings testifying to her experiences, and most recently, an attempted unlawful entry into the residence. This is not simply unfit parenting. It is endangerment. Lowell rose in response, his voice smooth but strained. Your Honor, while we acknowledge Dr. Pike's poor judgment, Mrs. Cole herself never harmed the child. The so-called evidence drawings, grainy videos, out-of-context recordings are interpretations. What we have here is a father, absent for much of Anna's early life, weaponizing circumstance to destroy the bond between mother and daughter. We ask the court to consider the child's need for stability, not theatrics. The judge listened in silence, his pen tapping lightly against his notepad. Then he turned toward Elaine. Mrs. Cole, before I issue my ruling, do you wish to speak? Elaine rose, her posture perfect, her voice trembling with carefully rehearsed emotion. Your Honor, I love Anna as if she were my own. I devoted years to her care, her home, her schooling. I may have made mistakes, but everything I did was out of love. This campaign against me is fueled by revenge, not truth. Please, don't let a little girl lose her mother. Richard felt his chest burn. He wanted to stand, to shout, to tear away the last mask she wore. But before he could move, the judge spoke. This court has reviewed every piece of evidence, every testimony, every report. Mrs. Cole, love is not measured in appearances. It is measured in safety, in care, in honesty. What I see here is not love, it is control, manipulation, and deceit. Elaine's smile cracked, faint but visible. Therefore, the judge continued, his voice firm. Custody of minor Anna Cole is awarded solely to her father, Mr. Richard Cole. Mrs. Cole is barred from unsupervised visitation. Further, the criminal charges of bribery, fraud, and attempted abduction will proceed under the jurisdiction of the district attorney's office. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell, sharp and final. The sound reverberated like thunder through the chamber. For a moment, Richard sat frozen, the words settling slowly into his bones. Then Anna, seated with Clara just behind him, slipped off her chair and ran into his arms. He lifted her high, tears blurring his vision, her small hands clutching the collar of his jacket. "Daddy," she whispered. And this time the word was not filled with fear but with certainty. Elaine remained seated, her hands gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white. Lowell leaned close, whispering urgently, but she stared forward, her face pale, mask shattered. Outside, the courthouse steps exploded with noise. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Richard walked past them, Anna in his arms, Clara at his side, Harris flanking him like a silent guardian. The air was cold but clean, and for the first time in months, Richard felt he could breathe without the weight of dread pressing against his chest. They reached the car, and Richard buckled Anna gently into her seat. She reached for her sketchbook, scribbled quickly, and held up the page. It was the house again, drawn larger this time, with windows glowing yellow and a sun rising above it. Beside the house, she wrote one word in bold, uneven letters: free. Richard's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead softly. Yes, free. That evening, back at the estate, the house felt different. The silence was no longer heavy. It was alive, full of possibility. Anna played with Lucky in the living room, her laughter echoing off the walls like music. Clara set dinner on the table, her eyes brighter than Richard had ever seen them. After dinner, Anna handed Richard her final drawing of the day. It was simple, 2 stick figures holding hands under a blazing sun, Lucky at their side, no cages, no boxes, no dark lines. Only light. Richard taped it to the refrigerator, smoothing it flat with careful hands. Then he crouched before Anna, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "The light stays on, Anna. Always, no matter what." She smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes, and leaned into him. For the first time, he believed it not just as a vow but as a truth already living in their home. Later, when the house grew quiet and Anna slept peacefully in her bed, Richard stood in his study, the monitors glowing softly. He opened the truth folder one last time, scrolling through the drawings, recordings, and files. It was no longer a shield, no longer a weapon. It was a history, a record of the storm they had survived together. He closed the laptop, turned off the monitors, and stood in the silence of a home reclaimed. Outside, the night was still, the sky clear, the stars steady. Inside, the light indeed stayed on, glowing softly from the lamp in Anna's room, a beacon against every shadow that had once haunted them. Richard whispered into the quiet, his voice carrying both relief and promise. "We are free, and we stand." The final day in court dawned gray and heavy, the kind of morning where the sky seemed to press low over the city, muting even the birds. Richard rose early, unable to eat, unable to pace anymore. Anna was still asleep upstairs, curled with Lucky at her feet, her sketchbook spread open beside her. On the page from last night was a house drawn bigger than ever before, a blazing sun overhead, and 3 letters written carefully in her uneven hand. Win. He touched the page softly before leaving, whispering, "For you." The courthouse hummed with quiet chaos when he arrived. Reporters huddled on the steps, their breath misting in the cold, microphones ready. Inside, the gallery was crowded. Neighbors, curious locals, even board members from Richard's foundation who wanted to see how the story ended. The press had turned this into theater, but for Richard, it was a reckoning. Elaine was already there. She wore black this time, a sharp contrast to her usual creams and lavenders. Her eyes painted carefully to hide the sleepless nights. Lowell sat beside her, his jaw tight, his hand tapping rhythmically against the table. They looked like 2 people trying to hold together a collapsing wall with bare hands. Judge Morrison entered, his presence quiet but commanding. "We are here to deliver the ruling in Cole v. Cole." Custody and related matters are before this court. ADA Kim rose. Her voice was calm, measured, every word placed with precision. Your Honor, the facts are clear. Mrs. Cole bribed a physician to falsify records. She attempted to remove the child unlawfully from the father's custody on more than one occasion. We have recordings, sworn testimony, and financial evidence. This is not rumor. This is not bias. This is pattern. A pattern of control, deception, and endangerment. Lowell stood, his voice smooth, but a little frayed at the edges. Your Honor, mistakes were made, yes. But Mrs. Cole has been demonized. Her image dragged through the mud. She provided structure when Mr. Cole was absent. Love when grief swallowed this family whole. The father presents himself as savior now. But the truth is more complicated. Anna deserves both parents. At minimum, shared custody. Judge Morrison turned toward Elaine. Mrs. Cole, do you have anything you wish to say before this court renders judgment? Elaine rose slowly. Her chin lifted, her hands clasped before her like a penitent. Your Honor, I have loved Anna since the day I entered this family. Every decision I made, even the ones painted here as monstrous, were made with her best interests at heart. I may have faltered, but I am not the villain in this story. I only ask for the chance to continue being her mother. Her voice cracked just slightly. Perfectly rehearsed, perfectly timed. Richard clenched his fists under the table, forcing himself to remain silent. The judge leaned back, folding his hands. For a long moment, the room was utterly still. Then he spoke. This court does not deal in image, it deals in evidence. And the evidence against you, Mrs. Cole, is overwhelming. Payments to Dr. Pike, falsified medical reports, audio and video recordings of threats and mistreatment. An attempted abduction caught on camera. These are not falters. They are choices. Choices that endangered a child. Elaine's face stiffened, the mask slipping just enough to show the fury beneath. Judge Morrison's voice was steady, resonant. Custody of minor Anna Cole is hereby awarded solely to her father, Mr. Richard Cole. Mrs. Cole is barred from unsupervised visitation. Any future contact will be contingent on the recommendation of child services and will occur only under supervision. Furthermore, charges of fraud, bribery, and attempted abduction will proceed to criminal court. This hearing is concluded. The gavel struck once, sharp and final, and the room erupted in whispers. Richard sat frozen, the words sinking slowly into his bones. Then Clara touched his shoulder from behind, her eyes glistening, and reality crashed in. He stood, breath shaking, as Anna, who had been kept in a side room with a counselor, was brought in. The counselor nodded at him. She asked for you. Richard dropped to his knees as Anna ran into his arms, her small body trembling, her sketchbook clutched tight. He held her close, unable to speak, tears streaming freely. She leaned back just enough to look at him and whispered, "We won, Daddy?" He smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we won. You're safe." Behind them, Elaine sat motionless, her eyes locked on the scene. For the first time, her face showed no charm, no polish, no control. Only defeat. Sharp and unyielding. Lowell whispered furiously in her ear, but she didn't respond. Her gaze stayed fixed on Anna, as though trying to memorize her before she slipped away forever. Outside, the courthouse steps exploded with questions, microphones shoved forward, cameras flashing. Harris and Kim flanked Richard, shielding him as he carried Anna through the storm. He didn't answer a word. The only voice he needed to hear was the little one whispering against his collar, "Home, home." That night, the estate glowed differently. It no longer felt like a fortress under siege, but a sanctuary reclaimed. Clara cooked soup, humming softly in the kitchen. Anna sat on the rug with Lucky, drawing furiously in her sketchbook. When she finished, she brought the page to Richard, her face alight. It was the house again, brighter than ever, every window glowing yellow. Above it stretched a massive sun, covering the whole page. Beneath, in shaky letters, she had written, "Light stays on, Richard's throat tightened. He taped it to the refrigerator, smoothing it flat. Then he scooped Anna into his arms, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "That's our promise, Anna. The light stays on. Always." Later, after she fell asleep peacefully, Richard walked the halls of the house. The cameras still blinked red, but for the first time, he didn't need them to feel safe. He stopped at the window, looking out at the quiet garden, the stars beyond. For months, shadows had ruled this home. Tonight, they were gone. He whispered into the stillness, not as a vow anymore, but as a truth already realized. We stand. We are free. And upstairs, in a small room lit by the glow of a nightlight, Anna slept soundly under the steady watch of a loyal dog, her drawings scattered around her like pieces of a future no one could steal. The story of Richard and Anna reminds us that justice is not always swift, but it is steady when anchored in truth. No matter how polished a mask of lies may appear, it will eventually crack under the weight of evidence and integrity. The tale shows that love is measured not in appearances or wealth, but in protection, sacrifice, and the courage to stand firm when darkness threatens. For parents, it is a reminder that children often speak through silence and symbols, and it is our duty to listen deeply. For all of us, the lesson endures. Light will outlast shadow, and the truth, though challenged, cannot be silenced.